All right, today we're going to pull back the curtain on storytelling. We're going to unlock the actual biological secrets that make stories one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful communication tools we have. So let's just dive right in. So let me ask you a question right off the bat. Do you think a story, just a bunch of words, could possibly increase the value of a physical object by more than 6,000%? I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? Well, it's not. It's absolutely true. There was this fascinating experiment called the Significant Object Study. A journalist went on eBay and bought 200 totally random objects, think little trinkets and junk, for about $129 total. Then he got a bunch of authors to write a short fictional story for each item. When he relisted those exact same items on eBay, but this time with the stories attached, they sold for almost $8,000. That's an average increase of 6,395%. Just wow. So, what in the world is going on there? This isn't just some weird fluke on the internet. This incredible jump in value is actually rooted deep, deep inside our brains. It's about how we are fundamentally wired to connect with a good narrative. The real key here is something called emotional investment. Just think about it for a second. The more emotionally invested you are in something, the less critical you tend to be. The speaker, David Phillips, he uses the perfect analogy, falling in love, right? For that first year, everything your partner does is just the most adorable thing on the planet. But then, somewhere around month 13, your critical thinking, as he says, returns from vacation. And all of a sudden, the way they slurp their tea isn't so cute anymore. A good story does the exact same thing to our brains. See, that's because when you're listening to a story, it's not just some intellectual thing happening. It's a full-on biological event. A really well-told story can literally flood your system with powerful hormones and neurotransmitters that just hijack your brain, making you feel, connect, and remember on a completely different level. Our brains can basically operate in two very different chemical states. On one hand, you've got the devil's cocktail. This is fueled by stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It makes us irritable, intolerant, and it actually makes it harder to remember things. And let's be honest, this is the state a lot of us are living in day to day. But a good story can create the complete opposite, the angel's cocktail. A mix of dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins that makes us focused, trusting, and way more creative. So the big question is, how do we actually mix this angel's cocktail for our audience? Well, let's break down the three main ingredients and figure out exactly how a storyteller can serve them up on purpose. Okay, first up, dopamine. This is basically our brain's reward chemical. It's the stuff that makes us super focused, feel motivated, and, this is a big one, remember things much more clearly. And the trigger for it is so simple. It's anticipation, it's suspense, it's that feeling of just having to know what happens next. In his talk, the speaker shows this perfectly. He's telling a story about this awful meeting he's about to walk into. His heart is pounding, he's sweating, and right when a woman is about to tell him the most crucial piece of information, he stops. He just stops the story cold and turns to the audience and asks, "And if I don't tell you what she says there, is that annoying?" And of course it is. That feeling you get, that, wait, you can't stop there, that's your brain getting a nice big hit of dopamine. So the technique is as simple as it is powerful. You build suspense. I mean, really, every single story does this naturally because we're always waiting to see how it ends. But if you intentionally use a cliffhanger, you can supercharge that effect and grab your audience's focus like almost nothing else. All right, our next ingredient is oxytocin. You've probably heard it called the love hormone, but it's really more like the chemical of empathy. It's what lets us feel a real connection with other people, what makes us generous and trusting. Honestly, it's what makes us feel human. Now, to trigger this, the speaker does something incredibly brave. He shares this deeply personal and tragic story about losing his newborn child. And by sharing that pain, by being that vulnerable and human, he creates this incredibly powerful bridge of empathy with the audience. You can't help but feel for him, and in that moment, a real bond of trust is formed. So the method here is all about creating empathy. And look, you don't have to share a personal tragedy, you just have to build a character that your audience can connect with, someone they can really feel for. When we feel that connection, our brains release that oxytocin, and we become so much more bonded and open to the person telling the story. And the final ingredient in our angel's cocktail is endorphins. Now, we usually associate these with something like a runner's high, right? But it turns out there's a much, much easier trigger to pull: laughter. When we laugh, our brain releases endorphins, which makes us feel more relaxed, more creative, and believe it or not, even more focused. And what better example of this is there than that classic viral video of a bride who literally cannot stop laughing while she's trying to recite her wedding vows? She is, as the speaker perfectly puts it, overdosing on endorphins. It's hilarious, it's so human, and it just instantly makes you feel good watching it. So the takeaway here is just beautifully simple. If you want to relax your audience, if you want to spark their creativity and really hold on to their focus, make them laugh. It's one of the most effective tools a storyteller could ever ask for. Okay, so we've got the science, we have the recipe for the angel's cocktail, but how do we actually apply all this? How do we go from just telling random stories to using them with real intention? This is what the speaker calls becoming a functional storyteller. And the process is just 3 simple steps. First, and this is crucial, you have to believe you can do it. Storytelling isn't some rare gift. It is a universal human skill we're all born with. Second, start writing down your stories. We all have 3 or 4 times more stories than we think we do. And third, and this is the real game changer, you index them. You tag your stories based on the main hormone they release. That way, you can literally pick the exact story you need to create the exact effect you want in any given situation. Now let's put all of this into perspective with a super quick history of how we communicate. For 100,000 years, we've passed down knowledge through storytelling. Cave paintings, they're about 27,000 years old. The written word is only about 3,500 years old. And PowerPoint, when this talk was given, it was a mere 28 years old. So after all those countless millennia of evolution, which one of these communication methods do you think your brain is most deeply, most biologically, and most beautifully wired for?